everybody. You're listening to the Big Chill Podcast. This is episode 806, Talking Tennis with Taro Daniel. Hello, Big Chillians, and welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. I'm Eddie, and for regular listeners, this will be a slightly different start to the episode. I am not joined by Frank. Unfortunately, Frank's dog Beans passed away, and he is also in LA for a hockey tournament, and the combination of those factors meant that we were not able to get an episode recorded as usual, but we are joined by professional tennis player Taro Daniel in just a couple of minutes to speak about life on the ATP Tour, tennis, some controversies from over the last year or two, and just insights into the life of a professional athlete, which I think it's a really interesting conversation whether you're a tennis fan or not. So stick around for that. If you're a new listener, which there's always a reasonable chance whenever we have a guest, this is not our normal format or dynamic. Normally, Frank and I would, even before an interview, speak a little bit about the world of sport and things that might be going on, but we'll kind of get straight to the interview this time, as I'm not going to be great at monologues, and I don't think anyone wants to hear my thoughts for 20 minutes straight on the FIFA Club World Cup. So this was just a little bit of an opportunity to explain why Frank wasn't with us for the interview, and also extend some well wishes from myself and from all the listeners, and we'll be happy to have him back on next week, hopefully with some good stories from that hockey tournament and from some other things. But until then, we'll hand things over to the interview and get joined by Taro Daniel. Well, welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. Now delighted to be joined by this week's guest, ATP tennis player Taro Daniel. Taro, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
It's obviously you're currently on the East Coast of the U.S. We were just speaking before we started recording. That's sort of one of your base camps, I guess, for part of the season. As maybe a little starting point, you obviously were over for the Wimbledon qualifiers. Now you'll be in the U.S. for the remainder of the summer. What does the rest of your tennis schedule look like for the next couple of months?
Yeah, so normally after Wimbledon, the American swing starts, and I have a house here in Florida, so it's kind of where I live. We're traveling so much anyways, you can't really call anywhere at home. But yeah, so the U.S. Open finishes around like end of August, beginning of September, and then after that, it's like the Asian swing, mostly. So they have, all sorts of big turn like the 500s and the 1,000 Masters. But then they also have like the challenger level tournaments around Asia, which is good because I can kind of base myself a little bit more in Japan.
And how far ahead of time then do you plan your schedule out in terms of tournaments you're going to take part in?
That's always very tricky. For some tournaments, we're able to choose like, a few months ahead. But then there are like some, like let's say a smaller tournament, like a challenger, where you're going to be like deciding 2-3 days before whether you're going to go or not. And a lot of times that's based on like whether you need the points that you're going to try and get there, or whether it's going to damage you in any way for the tournaments afterwards. So there's so many elements to it that it's just, and it changes with age as well, so certain elements that I didn't think about back when I was like 24 years old, now I think about quite a bit more. I definitely don't want to be in a chasing mood so much at this point in my career. And I definitely was until, I was like 28, 29. So, yeah, that's a very tricky part of the profession.
And a lot of our listeners will obviously watch tennis from time to time, but might not be sort of like deep tennis fans. So the tennis ranking calendar is a 365-day rolling calendar, correct, in terms of the points you accumulate. How much does that influence then, if you've performed well in a tournament last year, you feel more pressure to go back because otherwise you're losing points from your ranking? Does that play into it?
Yeah, definitely. So let's say like last year, 2024 January, I did really well in Auckland, New Zealand. and that gave me like 165 points, which is a lot for someone in my ranking. Um, and then this year in January, I didn't do well that week. It's not really about where you go, it's just about the time. It's like
Timing.
exactly 1 year after. So it doesn't matter where you get those points, you're gonna lose them. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so but there is you do plan your season a little bit around where you have those chunks of points because you always have these swings where you did really well in like a swing, and then there are other times where you just don't get any points. So depending on when you have that cushion, you kind of push a little bit more in certain times of the year.
And then along similar lines, in terms of the breakdown then between the different levels of Masters events, Challenger events, could you just give us a quick run through in terms of the type of ranking you might need to be involved in each one of those different levels?
Okay, so basically you have the Grand Slams first, which is the highest my form of competition. I guess it's like the US Open, Wimbledon, Roland Garros, and Australia. And in order to be in the main draw of those tournaments, you need to be like top 100, basically. If you're like 90, then you'll be in. You'll probably get in even if you're like 100. And then but from like 105 to down, you need to play the qualifying of those tournaments. And then if you're like 220, you can make the qualifying cut. And I'd say
Okay.
that's kind of where you're like starting to break even with tennis, financially. And then you got the Masters events, which is, Masters 1,000. So if you win the tournament, you get 1,000 points. In the slams, you get 2,000. But in the Masters, you get 1,000. But the draw sizes are 96 main draw and 48 qualifying. So actually, the requirements to get into a Masters is higher than to a Grand Slam. And then after that, it's like the 500s, 250s, and then below that, it's the challengers. But actually, the 500s probably have the toughest cuts because the draws are a lot smaller. So it's a 32 draw, but after you account the wild cards and the qualifiers, it's like a 20 something people that can get in straight into the main draw. So always ends up cutting around like 50. And the 250s, more like 100, depending on the week where it's scheduled. It can go anywhere from like 60, 70 to like 120. And then challengers are, yeah, depends. It's a tough challenger if it cuts at like 180. But you got the 125s, 100s, 75s, and the 50s. So it's like so many like like hierarchy, I guess.
Yeah. So also kind of explains, I guess, for listeners why it's then so challenging for you to really map things out too far ahead of time,
Yeah.
just in terms of
Yeah.
knowing what will actually be available
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on it there in terms of breaking even at a certain level. You had an article, where you were interviewed in the Financial Times recently, which got a little bit of press speaking about the disparity in pay between the top of tennis and the rest of it and how it's maybe could be better addressed in the future and going forward. How much sort of kind of can you dig a little bit deeper in terms of sort of at what level you said sort of you start to feel like you're really actually making money as a tennis player, what level you're just breaking even, and at what level it's a loss.
Yeah, I think if you're top 100, unless you're like a spending machine, you're gonna make money. So if you're logical about the way you spend, then you're gonna make money at that end of the year. And then even at 150, you will make some. At 200s, that's where you're kind of like in a borderline getting into the qualifying of the Grand Slams. That's where you're gonna be pretty close. But if you grind out with like playing some team matches in Germany, which is extra cash, and those things, then you can probably end up making some money. But yeah, it's very brutal because currently or is it always, but like these are like the best tennis players in the world, and it takes an entire lifetime to get there. So yeah, like a talented soccer player can't just pick up a tennis racket in college and then like because there's just no chance, right? Like you need to start when you're 6 years old. You need to get to this prestigious place, And these prestigious places are making so much money, but we're not like, we're not in a safe place. So that's a very something I feel very strongly about. Yeah.
And so, how would you like to see it improved? Just a greater percentage of the money go to earlier rounds, to challenger events? Sort of, what's the ways in which that could be made better?
Yeah. I think I would rather see like that bigger percentage of money go towards the players, but towards the expenses for our expenses because we're paying for all our flights and hotels and stuff and the food and we're bringing a coach with us. So, like I said in the article with the Financial Times, like my operational expenses go normally up to like $20,000 a month. So like 250 more or less a year of just flights and all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't include the salary for my coach and my trainer. So if you're a top 100 player who's like bringing along their coach and their physio, you're going to be spending like $500,000 a year. And um, of course, if you look at the prize money of a guy who's 50, 60, you're going to earn close to a million, but that's not a very big margin, after taxes and that's a very, very hard work. Like it's not like, oh yeah, you just show up and like it's not like you get injured, you don't get any of that, right? Like
Yeah.
so I would rather see like more percentage of the profits or the gross revenue from those bigger tournaments go into like kind of stipends so that players don't have to worry so much about their flight expenses and stuff. More than like making our careers more lucrative. I think that would be the next step, but like we need to have players like around up until like 500 like not be worried about like traveling money.
And how does that work then? So, say you want to play in a challenger, like there's the Newport Challenger going on right now, right?
Yeah.
If you were playing there, how does it work in terms of hotel accommodation? Because obviously you don't know whether you're going to be knocked out in the first round or you're going to
Yeah.
make it to the
Yeah.
final. Do they arrange all of that for you? Do you have to make a kind of reservation for that entire length of the tournament, cross your fingers, hope that it's something you can cancel? How does all that work?
Okay, so I'm in Sarasota, Florida right now, but if I was to play Newport, then I would fly there. But the hotel reservation, there is a portal on our like ATP player zone, they call that. Like so there's a portal to book the hotels from, and there's always an official hotel, and they cover one room from like the Saturday before up until you lose,
Okay.
basically. Um, but that doesn't include the coach's room, for example. So and the bookings are flexible. That's the you book it till the end of the tournament. You leave earlier, they don't charge you a cancellation fee normally. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how it works with hotels.
And that would be the same too. So, like at Wimbledon, there'll be an official Wimbledon
Yes.
hotel. And if you're not choosing to get your own accommodation, that's what you would go through.
The bigger cities are a bit stricter with the cancellation policies. So
Yeah.
like Wimbledon, like they'll charge you a night if you just say the night before that you're leaving.
Okay.
But the ATP tournaments where they're done in the maybe like not as big cities, like they're more flexible.
Okay. Interesting. And how popular, sort of at what level do you stop using the sort of tournament provided hotel? And I'm presuming like Novak Djokovic is not staying in the hotel that is being set aside. So what up to what ranking do you typically see a player going through that?
I think everyone except for the really big names.
Okay.
So the only ones that are not staying there are Djokovic, Alcaraz, Sinner, and that's pretty much it. The rest of the guys are pretty much staying in the official hotel. Maybe if you're like, let's say if you're in a 500 tournament and you're a number one seed, like a Zverev, let's say, or Medvedev, like they'll probably get like, instead of one room, they'll probably get like two, three rooms covered. But that's kind of under the table deal that they're making, which is also kind of weird. But yeah, those things happen all the time.
And speaking about those under the table deals too, there's been a little bit of discussion surrounding obviously top players getting paid just to turn up to certain tournaments. What level does that start? Is that every tournament there's someone being paid to be there? Sort of how exactly is that structured?
Yeah, there's no structure. It's really just like, let's say, I think in a 250 event, right? Like a guy who's like 20, 30, he'll probably get something. It's not going to be big. It's maybe like, let's say like 15,000 or 20,000 to show up. Like someone like Tommy Paul, who's 15 in the world or something, he'll probably get around 25,000 for showing up in a 250, and all the expenses covered or something like that. But then, of course, if it goes up to like Alcaraz or something and he shows up at a 500, then he'll get, close to 1 million. But yeah, that money is probably coming out of the tournament sponsors, which could have gone to the tournament. Yeah, that's another whole thing that's just kind of
And,
screwed up for me. Yeah.
and how much, I mean, you mentioned in the Financial Times article that you're sort of fortunate enough to be in a position where you're not too stressed about kind of making money on a weekly, monthly basis. In terms of within the tennis locker room, is it something that's openly discussed? Do you have players speaking about, I need to make it to a certain round this tournament? I have certain bills to pay. Like, is that common knowledge, common discussion?
Yeah, so actually, just like the other day in Italy, I was there. I grew up in Spain, so I have a lot of friends in like the Spanish tennis, the Spanish players, And I was talking to them, and one of the guys, he's like 300. He's been around 300, 280, that range for like the past, 5 years. Another guy who was injured for the past year or two just kind of got up and now he's like 100 finally. But I was talking to them about my expenses and how much I'm paying my coach and stuff, right? And they were like, but there's no chance I can pay. Like they're like in Spain the salaries are a bit cheaper than in the US. So in the US you can't get any coach for under 1,500 bucks a week. But in Spain, you'll normally pay like a monthly salary of maybe 3 to 4,000 euros plus 10% prize money. So it ends up being less than 1,500. But then they were saying like, yeah, me where I am, like, there's no chance I can pay for a coach.
And, and
And yeah.
And so then your coach, for example, he's or she would be coaching other players. How does that then work in terms of tournaments that they're attending? Like if you're sharing your coach with another player, you're going off to play in Tokyo, he's playing in Beijing. How does that work in terms of who gets priority? Is it based on who pays more, who's the higher ranked? Like what's the structure there?
That really depends. That used to happen a lot more a few years ago. People were a little bit more relaxed and not as like uptight about like sharing coaches. So then it would just be about the agreement, like who had the coach first, for example. Sometimes kind of determines who gets the priority and who chooses, like if there's a conflict and where to go. That really depends on the personal agreements, and yeah, it could depend on money as well. But there's very few players sharing coaches currently. It's
Okay.
become more and more like professional and like very, very strict. Like I don't want to share information with the other guy type of situation.
Okay. And how much then in terms of on a day-to-day or weekly basis, what is your coach really helping you with? Because you've kind of reached a stage, right, where there's not going to be some transformational improvement in your game,
Yeah,
probably. Like you're not
yeah,
suddenly going to start hitting a one-handed backhand.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so what are you really working on in sort of preparation for a tournament?
It's very, very subtle stuff, like technically like things that like a normal person can't even tell, like if let's say with the forehand, like when I'm preparing my forehand, like instead of like angling my shoulders a little bit 60, like a little bit like 160 degrees, you got to be flat, kind of, and things that you can't really see but make a huge difference in that small. And then also more like kind of emotional support in the sense that somebody who knows what's going on is there for you and you're trying to figure things out together. um, I always thought that a coach was someone who'll have the answers for me and tell me what to do, but it's a very different situation now. It's been very different the last few years, but I learned in the beginning, like, oh yeah, you tell me what to do and you have the answers. If I follow you, then I'll be number one in the world, right?
Yeah.
But like now it's more like, okay, like what did you think about that? And like what can I do here kind of conversation. And it's such a shift.
And
Yeah.
so then in terms of like if you kind of thinking about other than those subtle tweaks, are there moments over the last couple of years where you've made a more substantial change to your game?
Yes. I've made quite a few changes the last like maybe 8 years. Because I was a very defensive, very like passive type of player. And then I moved out of Spain when I was like 22 years old, so like around, yes, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And then I moved to US, Japan, and then kind of started working with the coach I have now. But definitely needed to start transitioning a little bit further into the court and like technique with the forehand, like I had to make it a little bit more compact. The serve had to be more efficient. So generally kind of learn to adapt to the faster balls that are coming in and stuff. And yeah, a lot of changes that I've made. Um, Actually more than I have when I was a kid. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty
A-
fascinating.
And so you came through then the sort of Spanish academy system for tennis. Were there, you kind of mentioned already coming through with a lot of Spanish players, were there big names that you were competing with on a regular basis at a very young age? Or sort of what did that look like at, say, in your mid-teens?
So I was in an academy called Tennis Val, and Marat Safin used to train there sometimes, and then David Ferrer used to be there quite a bit. So he kind of, you know, kind of mentored me for a few years. We even shared like a coach for a little bit. But I got to practice with him a lot. Um, well, he's like the classic, like just like keep rally, 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 don't not miss, and like not deviate from a plan, type of player. And that's the school that I was brought in. And there are other players like Pablo Andujar, Daniel Jimeno, who are less known, but who are like, 40, 50, 60 in the world. And I got to train with them quite a bit as well. And it was a very privileged situation, but it also was a very, um, strict. Like Spanish are very, very strict in sports. The
Yeah.
way they train their athletes is very like a lot of discipline. Yeah.
So were you living full time in the academy and or were you living at home, going to the academy on a daily basis? How did that work?
Yeah, so luckily we rented an apartment like outside, like in the city in Valencia. So that made things a lot. Well, and our academy was too small to have lodging. So, everybody had to kind of find their own place to stay and then kind of commute, which was helpful because let's say if I was a kid and like practicing in a place like IMG or like Rafa Nadal's academy where they have lodging, like I couldn't have, there's no chance I could have like, um, uh, like stayed with that for years. It's very tough. It's not a nice situation to be in. So it was nicer to stay in the city, have a bit of a, yeah, normal life, I guess, outside of the academy. Yeah.
Now you see more and more players, certainly in the US, going through the collegiate system and going through the NCAA. That's become sort of more popular over the last 5 years or so, and you're seeing college players transitioning well from NCAA to ATP. Do you think if you were 10, 15 years younger, would that have been a consideration for you now in a way that it wasn't
Yes.
then? Yeah.
Yeah, because back then when I was around like at that age, but like, oh, should I go to college or not? Then like the it was clearly superior to train in an academy versus going to college. But now it's like the college actually they have so much money and they have amazing facilities to train in. The level is pretty good and they have access to actually more technologies and like data and stuff than we do. So, and that's really the reason why the level has changed so much, in my opinion, is because like there's all this like new information on how to train more efficiently towards tennis and like how to tactically like biomechanics and all that stuff that we didn't really have access to back then. So it was all about like, okay, in Spain you're a grinder, in the US you're like overly aggressive, kind of
Yeah.
this very no in between. And now it's like everybody's playing that in between game very efficiently because they have access to all this data. And the college system is really good for that, in my opinion. So, and they're even paying the players now. So, it's a better, it's also good because like socially, I think it's a good, I don't think it's good for education
Yeah.
because if you're a student athlete, like I've never met anyone who's had like a worthwhile education while they were also playing. Everybody has like a sociology degree, which is like the easiest
Yeah.
thing to do, and you can't really do anything with that degree. Um, so like nobody actually got anything worthwhile out of education, but they did make friends, like long-lasting friendships, and they also learn how to play within a team. And it's 4 years of friendship that you go through instead of like just grinding on the futures, like
Yeah.
from the get-go, which is not healthy. So I would, if it was the way it is now, I would have gone to college probably.
And speaking about then that friendship, is it tough to make friends on tour? I mean, I guess you have to because otherwise, obviously, your friends where you're from aren't going to travel with you all the time. So, sort of, what's that like in terms of socializing when you're kind of traveling? What does that look like?
That's also shifted quite a bit. So when I started in the circuit, it was quite a bit easier. I had quite a few friends and, like some Aussie players and even the Japanese players and Spanish players and everything. It's like it was a lot. You were kind of forced to socialize because the phones weren't as active. Uh, and but now it's like everybody has their own team, even in the challengers. Very few players are traveling alone.
Okay.
So like everybody has their coach and their whatever. So like they're going to dinner with that by themselves. And it used to be way more social in the sense that okay, you would see all the Spanish guys in like table of 7 or 8 in a tournament versus now it's like tables of 2, 3, and there's no connection between the players. Um, so it is a lot more difficult now to make friendships, but that's just I think society in general currently. But yeah, it's that's a definitely important part for me because like if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have survived on the circuit. Like I need to socialize a little bit every day to survive, and that's something that it's a conscious effort now to do.
Okay. And so then there's obviously not a huge number of Japanese players on tour. So you're not got a big Japanese contingent that you're going to be seeing. Are you most closely associate then with the other Spanish players because of that growing up there?
Yeah, definitely Spanish players and the Aussie players. I find the Aussie players to be more humble, I guess. So like they're more like all the players currently that are up there and the that are Australians, they're not like the guys who were super, super good when they were juniors. So they've had more of like a steady kind of, like guys like Alex Vukic and Christopher O'Connell and those guys, they weren't like amazing when they were young. So like they're easier to kind of talk to. And one of my better friends actually was John Millman. I don't know if you know him, but
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, maybe it's also because like they're kind of half Asian, like Asia,
Yeah.
Oceania kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, like Japanese, Spanish, and some Aussies, I think are, yeah.
Makes sense. And so is it easier then kind of do you see a divide in terms of how you're socializing based on like if you go to when you're at a Grand Slam, is there a split if you're a top 10 player, you're only really talking with other top 10 players, a split elsewhere? You kind of mentioned there that if you were a young, like a very highly, sort of thought of young player, does that change in terms of who you then interact with when you go pro? Like what are those sort of dynamics like?
Yeah, with the top 10, like it's very hard to tell. I don't want to like judge them too harshly, but I mean, they're never at the site really. They're not like hanging out at the club. So when they like finish practice or when they finish their media appearance, they're kind of gone. Which you can't blame them because a lot of people are like, sharks and trying to get their attention. Um, but I'd say like Alcaraz and Djokovic are quite social in that sense. They're, saying hi to everyone in the locker room and all that. But there is definitely like the top 10 guys are actually friendlier with other top 10 girls
Okay.
than like the rest of the circuit because
Yeah.
I feel like they connect more on that like on that very top of the podium common denominator they have.
Yeah, I guess
Um
it makes sense. They're
yeah,
dealing with
yeah,
some of the same pressures and
yeah,
other things that might be going on,
yeah.
the kind of outside of away from the court. How does that then work? So when you go to Wimbledon, for example, I know Wimbledon's very strict on the access that you get for practice time when you're there. You only get your 30 minutes per day, right? Or something along those lines. Is what's it like at most Grand Slams in terms of access that you get to facilities? And will you then just spend all day based out of the sort of training cafeteria that they might provide, gym, whatever that's like?
Yeah, the Grand Slams are the toughest places to practice in because there's just too many players. Like there's, like 200 men, 200 women, and like wheelchair and doubles and all that. So it's like very tough to practice. It's always like a jungle battle to get courts. Um, and Wimbledon, yeah, especially because, you can't practice really early in the morning, even if you want to, because of the problem with the humidity and the dew and stuff. That you can't step on the grass when it's a little bit wet because it'll ruin it. And so it is the getting practice court part is yeah, it's in the Masters and in the Grand Slams, it's a battle.
And so will you then train outside? You'll find other facilities that you can use to kind of get on court as much as you need to, or do you just not need
Yes.
in the midst of a tournament? Do you not need to be hitting that, like hitting that much?
Yeah, normally with it, like until you lose, you don't really need that much court time. Once you lose, and they'll say like you have like an entire week before your next match, then you do want to get out and like to be able to feed balls and also play points to have a little bit more of that space. So most of the tournaments do have like a second practice site, second or third practice site. Um, but yeah, in the slams, they have less of them. Or I mean, they do have them, but like, then there's like the juniors coming in and the
Yeah.
wheelchair people coming in and all that. So it's like, it's always busy. Um, yeah. Uh, but the second side, third side, that definitely help to like do work on your person, like for work on your like specifics and all that.
And do you find yourself watching a lot of tennis when you're not playing, or are you just out tennised by sort of like right now? You are you tuning into Wimbledon, or is that just you zone out from it?
I follow what's going on briefly, and if it's on TV when it's on somewhere, I'll watch it. But I don't like watch it. I don't need to watch it.
Okay.
But then like the only one I did do that with was in Paris with Alcaraz and Sinner, which I felt like something was brewing there that was really cool. So we did like I was in Italy with my sister, but like we were like trying to find ways to watch it and stuff. Um, but yeah, normally I don't watch too much.
Okay, it makes sense.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
okay, speaking about then like other people attending, you've spoken about the cost associated with your coach, your physio coming. How does it then work in terms of family, friends? And this isn't asking for tickets, but like attending an event to watch you. Do you have to pay for them? How many tickets do you get? Like, how does that kind of system work?
Yeah, tickets are actually quite different with every tournament. Normally, you get like if you're playing on a bigger court, then you'll get like these box tickets, which are your team's, seats. So normally that'll have like 8 to like 15 seats, depending on the court. So that's most of the times enough. You don't need more than that. But then outside, some tournaments are a lot more like lax with it, and others are very strict. Like Wimbledon will only give you like one or two grounds passes for your guests. But like in the US Open, they're more, or in the Aussie Open, they're more relaxed about it. So they'll give you, normally the rule is four, but if you need more and the other players aren't using it, they'll give you like six. So it's really,
Do you have
yeah.
to pay for those?
No, no, no. You
You-
get them for free.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Just you never know. Might have been an
Yeah, yeah,
interesting way
yeah.
for them to up revenue. Okay. And so uh, obviously we also I mentioned this to you pre-podcast or recording, that one of the other areas, I wouldn't say you got any kind of real flack for it, but there was the big controversy surrounding Sinner and his positive drug tests, and the suspension, which both seemed convenient in terms of the length that he was given, the timing in the season that it was given to him, the fact that it wasn't really released initially that he had tested positive. It felt like he was certainly getting beneficial treatment regardless of how you felt about the excuses, how legitimate those might be.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts, and sort of what were the thoughts on tour? Was it a big topic of discussion? Has it changed the way people interact with Sinner in any way? What's that look like?
Yeah, I was really angry when that first came out because, it's just the process was completely different to what other players were getting. Because normally those things they take so much time. So first, when you test positive, there's like this kind of, okay, you're suspended for now, and then we'll see what happens. And that from when you're suspended, like that takes months for there to be any like verdict of. But then he was kind of like he tested positive. He kept playing. We didn't know about it, and then oh yeah, 3 months, or yeah, 3 months, and then you can start playing in Rome at your home tournament. It's like everything about it, yeah, like you say, was very sketchy. I then like I don't personally know Yannick that much, but he's super polite and like nice, very cordial. Um, so if I was him, like I would take advantage of all that as well. But and I don't think that like he was like purposely cheating like super hard. And so, and tennis is not like super beneficial to like dope. It's not like weightlifting or like sprinting 100 meters where like if you dope, you're gonna get a better result. Like in tennis, it doesn't work that way. So I'm not like, oh yeah, he's number one in the world because he's doped or anything, but the whole process is very confusing. And there's a lack of understanding, a lack of kind of the logistics of how everything works. Like there are other players who have contamination positives and they were out for a year and a half, or there are players that like um we have to do these whereabouts, like we have to kind of log where we're at every single day. And if we're not there when they come and test you at home, and if you strike out 3 times, then you get suspended.
Yeah.
Well, there were a couple of players who got suspended for that for like almost 2 years. And like, how can that be worse than actually testing positive for steroids? And so, yeah, the process is just, I mean, there's no, it's the same with the Swiatek thing. In a way, for me, her thing is worse, because it got even swept more under the rug. And like Sinner's thing at least became public, and like, well, like Swiatek's thing, if you didn't actually go into it, you didn't really, you
Yeah.
know, yeah. So yeah, a lot of very like shady things going on, and you can't deny it. Um,
And was that
but
a big
yeah.
was that a big topic of conversation then at tournaments with other players?
Yes, but not as much as you would expect. The
Okay.
players are very much like, I do sense that, okay, the players avoid talking about these political stuff to be able to focus on their game. And I personally can't. I can't shift out of
Yeah.
like the lack of justice there is. So maybe that's hurt my game in the last year. But I think it's bigger than our personal results, these things, because um, I think it matters to stand up for what you believe is right, and and you got to start with the where you're at. You don't have to talk about war and Syria and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
That's just
Yeah.
too out of touch for me. But like if maybe you can, because these things they happen in bigger places, and then they turn out to, maybe for student loan kind of problems, like those bigger problems that there are in the world. But we can start if we can start with somewhere really small like this.
No.
I see it. Yeah.
And it's kind of linked, right? The talking point about the financial disparity to then also a different treatment in terms of, had you had the same issue that Sinner had, you probably receive a different punishment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of reflected then too in a game that is very top heavy in terms of financial rewards. Like the star power is getting that they are getting treated differently to what, and you know, you need all 200 of those players in order to
Yes,
support the
yes.
tour. Like you can't have
Yeah.
Wimbledon
Yeah.
without number 110 losing in the
Yeah.
first round.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, no, it makes sense to be out. I was actually, I mean, and as a we spoke about it a reasonable amount as a podcast, surprised at how, other than like Kyrgios being very outspoken about it, I felt like
Uh-huh.
that didn't really get any traction just because it's Nick Kyrgios and he's
Yeah.
just outspoken about everything. So that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just like, I think people treated that as if he was looking for attention rather than he was dealing with an
Yeah,
issue.
exactly.
Um, it was surprising how little and how quickly it's moved on. To
Yeah,
be
yeah. I
to
mean,
like,
Sinner's being back to being the super nice guy, the gentle guy who's, always nice. And it's true. Like I'm super, super impressed with the way he's dealt with it
yeah,
personally, because he's had like zero emotional fluctuation that we can see from the outside. And it's really impressive. I could never pull that off. But like, yeah, you can't just kind of brush it off and like forget about it. It's just um I don't think you have to focus on that thing specifically, but it's just showing how the whole thing is like messed up. And yeah, we need more serious, like not that Kyrgios isn't serious, but like some more like players that have been in the circuit for a long time, like me, or guys that are ranked higher. And Novak is amazing at that. He's really, I think, someone that's to be. I really respect him a lot because he's gone against the popular opinion,
sure, yeah, yeah,
but trying to do the right thing, kind of.
yeah.
And there was really no like benefit for him to do it, really. There's no financial incentive or anything. So,
And
yeah.
you've been complimentary of Novak twice here, saying he's a very nice guy. He kind of plays tennis and sort of carries himself with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder that he always feels like he's not as loved as like Rafa was or Roger Federer was, and I maybe he's just using that as a motivator more than anything else. Do you feel like that's do you think he really deep down feels that way, or that's just his way of kind of finding extra motivation and energy when he needs it?
He's really good at finding motivation from wherever he can get it.
Yeah.
So, I think at that, yeah, I think he's just really good at like finding fire out of anywhere. And yeah, he's done that all like I think also it's like a Yugoslavian thing to like find something to fight for. It's like they're always like arguing, like there's very few like Yugoslavian guys that are like very like chill and like, oh yeah, that's true, yeah, yeah, but they'll always fight you, like they'll always go against you in a conversation for fun. That's their way of being, and it's like it's pretty fascinating. It's a very different, like it's even more than the Latinos, they do that too, but it's like more than that. So it's I think they're naturally very like oriented towards, like battling. Um yeah, so I think that's why they're really good at sports. Yeah.
And, and how much do you think then, sort of when you're preparing for, I asked the first question, how much are you preparing for an individual opponent going into a matchup. So between rounds, looking, obviously you'll be familiar with most of the players that you're playing against and will have played against them previously. But are you sort of from one round to the next going and doing, kind of getting tape out and thinking about what's a weakness that I can try and expose? Is there a way that this person's playing this week that is a good matchup for me? Or are you just trying to play your sort of best game from one match to the next?
That also kind of goes up and down through different periods. Few years ago when the data analytics part started coming into the game, I started using it, and then you're kind of like trying to study like where the guy serves more and what the guy's good at. But the games become everyone's kind of playing a similar game now. Most guys have an amazing backhand and their forehands are very big, but they make a few more errors from there. And the serve, everybody serves well. So there's very few holds. So in a way, right now for me, it's not so much about how to play the other guy, but how do I adapt to this level which just insane level that's coming at everybody right now. It's like few years ago, a lot of players still had like kind of a weak backhand. So my game is to like hit high to that backhand and then break that down. But now, like, it's very hard to do that because if you hit a high ball, they'll just like completely like slam it. And then you're like, oh yeah, what the hell's going on? You know? So now it's more for me, at least right now, it's more about like trying to gain confidence in my game
Yeah.
versus trying to like really break down a specific opponent.
And as a player, do you find, because we've seen that in a lot of professional sports where the data comes in and then everyone starts doing the smart thing. So either in terms of the things they learn how to do, but also the decisions that they take during a game. It's like playing chess, but you know all the moves. Does that make it more boring? Like, would you rather have from one round I play someone with a bad backhand, but he hits like angles that someone else doesn't hit, and then this guy's like, is that more enjoyable or sort of
Yeah, I think tennis was more enjoyable back then.
okay?
But like until like 10 years ago before the data came in. Because yeah, because now also things are so fast. You need to be an Alcaraz level of talent in order to pull off like an amazing like angle or a drop shot. But like when the balls are coming so fast, it's really hard to give variation to the game. So it becomes more about like who can punch harder the whole time.
Yeah.
And before it was there's more height, there's slice, there's drop shot, serve and volley, um, and more playing with feeling and reading game than studying it and like analytically playing the game. So now I'm really amazed at the level that's being displayed, but it's like there's not much a guy can do really when the ball's coming back.
Yeah.
And
That
it's,
makes
yeah, but yeah.
and I mean, I guess it only gets worse. You only got Tsitsipas, who obviously not having a very good season, but sort of trying to hold on for the one-handed backhanders in the men's game. Is that just dead? We'll never. Do you think we'll never see like a top 10 player with a one-handed backhand ever again?
Like it would need to be so good, like an
Yeah.
amazing one-handed backhand. But like Tsitsipas' one-handed backhand is a bit of a weakness. It's a bit of too much of a weakness for the top 10 currently. I feel like.
And and
You
and for our listeners who aren't as into tennis, what's the major disadvantage of the one-hander versus a two-hander, and why can that be exposed more easily?
Because with the one-hander, when the ball gets above your shoulders, it's very hard to control that. With a two-hander, you can kind of push it a little bit more with the left hand, so you can kind of knife it a little bit and neutralize. But with the one-hander, you need to, if the ball comes high, you can't hit down on it. So you have to hit up on it. And then a lot of times the one-handers, they do hit up, but then they might end up hitting that out because that's a very hard shot. It's a super, super hard shot. Um, and that's something I love to do, that was a Spanish game, like hit high to the guy's one-handed backhand, and then they would kind of end up breaking it down. They couldn't. That's what Rafa was doing this to Roger the whole time.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why Roger struggled so much with that backhand.
And on the back of the that you obviously mentioned already that Alcaraz Sinner Roland Garros final, McEnroe got a little bit of flack for sort of saying that he thought that Sinner or Alcaraz would beat Nadal in his prime on clay. Do you think that's the case because of that evolution of the game, or do you think Nadal would sort of still remain untouchable even with his style?
I definitely agree with McEnroe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As I like in terms of like an entire skill set, I think Rafa is still superior. He's stronger mentally. He's more adapting like to different situations. But if you played Rafa in his prime and the Sinner or an Alcaraz right now, I think Sinner Alcaraz would win because they just have too many strengths for Nadal to break down. But if you took away the analytics and everything and just played pure person to person, then I think Rafa would win.
Okay.
But these guys are hitting the ball too hard for any of the guys from a few years ago to bat like to compete against them.
And the counter to that was that the sort of spin that Nadal got in his forehand and how sort of high
Yes.
that kicked up would make it harder for them to be able to hit with that same type of power. You just don't think they would still be able to handle it?
Yeah, I don't think that they would have, maybe in the first set they'd have trouble with it.
Okay.
But like Rafa struggle always with guys that have really good two-handed backhands. So especially with Sinner, I think he would struggle more because okay, Sinner would at one point take that backhand a little bit earlier and then start pushing him around with his forehand. And then it'd be too fast for Rafa at the like in the end. Like I believe, yeah, like tennis evolves, any sport evolves, like anything evolves, and then no matter how good these guys were, like the next generation's always gonna beat them, um, because it's just a different game.
No, it makes sense. We have this debate
Yeah,
routinely, right? I think you're correct. Like every sport gets better. You have the benefit, right, of learning from people who came before you and sort of, so someone brings something into a sport and then 10 years later, everyone has that.
yeah.
And, so like something that would set you apart 20 years ago is just a standard thing nowadays. So speaking of changes and evolutions of the game, this is more of a like technical, like gear geek question. But one of the big things you've seen from string tensions is a reduction in string tensions over the last like 10, 15 years. How much has that changed in terms of within you, for you, in terms of how you've had your racket strung? And was that difficult to adjust to in any way? Or were you kind of, have you seen the benefits of, say, lower? I'm presuming you're playing with a lower tension now than you were 15
Yes.
years before.
Yeah, there's playing with lower tenor is just generally better because it's not as hard on your arms and stuff, and it's not gonna fly off on you like you think. So like when I was a kid, like everybody used to string at like 60 pounds or like 55 pounds, which right now would feel like playing with a frying pan. It's like, but now I play with like 44, 46, and you get a lot more spin and you can accelerate more with so but then there's been a lot of changes with the racket as well. So, when I was up until 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, people were using heavier rackets, like heavy rackets, so that the racket would kind of do the work and bring the ball forward. But now the balls are so fast that if you have a racket that's too heavy, you can't accelerate through it as much. So then people are using lighter rackets again, with low tension so that they can really swing on the ball. So like there's so many like things are changing so quick. Um, but yeah, the lower string tension has been like most people who hit with a lot of topspin use a lower tension.
And are you using the same string? You're using one string across your entire racket? Are you mixing
Yes, yes,
one
yes.
string?
I was mixing it till last year. I was using gut. on the cross, but then I felt like that was starting to fly off a little too much. So I went back to polyester.
Okay. And from a gear perspective, you're a Babolat player.
Mhm.
How frequently are you evaluating new rackets? How much is your choice of racket influenced by them releasing a new racket? Sort of how does, I mean, I know it's one of the big myths of the game, right? That a lot of players are not changing their rackets. They're just getting paint jobs on rackets that they
Yeah,
could, like that racket is not available for sale, but they want
yeah,
to, they're a head boom player and they got to get a,
yeah.
like, make it look like they're using a boom. Are you using the racket that you say you are, if you see what I mean?
Yes.
And okay. And how frequently are you considering like each new season? Are you looking at the new line of Babolat rackets and kind of playing around with them?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Like every season they do a remodel or something, we definitely try it. But more than the actual frame, like what's more important is like the weight balance and how much weight you put on it. So I mean rackets as well, they're all becoming so kind of good and very like not as many like differences. Like back then, like a Babolat Pure Drive was the ultimate power racket. And then like the head prestige was the other side was like the ultimate control. But there's not as many like these ultimate control super hard rackets. Every racket kind of has the spin and the control and the power. So then it's more important to focus on the weight balance and the type of string that you're using, I think. Of course, the frame is still important, but it's not the main thing anymore.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you're seeing players switch rackets more frequently, it feels like, than they used to in the
Uh,
past. Is that dictated by pressures in terms of sponsorship deals, or is that because players are looking for those sort of marginal gains that they might be able to get?
I think the marginal gains, I don't think people are like changing rackets because of money. That's the only thing I think people can't really let go, like sacrifice. Even if the racket company would be paying a lot, like yeah, it'd be tough to change like to a brand that's just not very good or doesn't have any reputation. So a lot of times these newer companies that have a lot of money, they probably allow the players to use the racket that they like and they just paint on top of it. Um, because some of the brands that I won't mention, but their just rackets are just not pro standard.
Okay.
So like there's no chance that that guy's using that brand, you know?
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Interesting.
yeah.
And and so how does that typically work? Kind of getting back into the finances of tennis. Are you getting paid by Babolat? Are they just giving you free rackets, free gear? How does that also work in terms of where that kicks in versus of free stuff versus paid to actually use something?
I do get paid, but the racket companies, they unfortunately don't have that much money. They're really like, always on the line of okay, are we profitable or not? So they don't have that much money for advertisement, I guess, or ambassadorship. But I get the rackets for free and whatever comes together with the racket, and I get paid like a little bit. Yeah, but then some newer company that might have like a bigger parent company like I'd say like a Dunlop has a lot of money because they have Strixon, which are making a lot of money from golf. And so then they have more money to throw towards tennis investments. But Babolat's an only tennis or Wilson is mostly tennis. Those ones are, it's not as easy for them financially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most players on tour then they're just getting free gear. Is that
Yes.
fundamental?
Yeah. Most players are. Yeah. Yeah.
And is anyone buying their own racket? Like, are there players out there who are having to pay for that?
I've never heard of racket, like people buying rackets. But I've heard of people like having to buy shoes,
Okay.
and these are guys like 250, and that's pretty rough because like you're going through a lot of shoes.
Yeah. We had a footballer on who plays in the championship, the level below the Premier League, and we were surprised. He said that he bought his own boots, which That amazed me because I would have
Yeah,
again
yeah,
just
yeah.
thought at that level all the gear would have been taken care of. Not that Nike's necessarily going to be paying you, but they're at least going to send
Yeah.
you 20 pairs of boots a year. But yeah, that was not the case. Interesting though. And so, I mean, you're not approaching the end of your career by any stretch, and like obviously tennis players are playing for longer and longer now.
Yeah.
What do you already have an idea in terms of post playing what you want to do, whether that's going to coaching, media? Is that kind of something you've thought about?
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it more. Like psychology and like kind of mental health or like kind of well-being parts, something I've practiced a lot myself in the last few years, and I really fascinated by it. I love studying, so like I'd like to kind of be like a bit of like a holistic life coach kind of thing, you know, and kind of trying to approach things through many different angles. Um, because the more I kind of practice on myself, I see that it's not like normally if you have problem in one place, it's not like just because of this, you know, there's a connection to the way you're eating or the way you're sleeping and you know, or whether you're confused on what instinct is, you know, like what all these things that are very connected. And but then there are times that they're separate as well. You know, there's this, and I think that space is something that AI can't really take over. It's also something that I'm very fascinated by. So yeah, like connecting dots and separating them, you know, in the well-being area, that's kind of what I'm pretty interested in.
Specifically, then with tennis players, or you just mean as a whole?
As a whole, but I would like to help tennis players to kind of get their head out of this kind of very specific. My focus wouldn't be to make them a better tennis player.
Yeah.
My focus would be like, hey man, like life is so much bigger and you're gonna regret it if you keep like chasing it too much. Like that's kind of the angle I would have. So if a player comes to me and like he or she wants help and she's like, I want to be the number one player, like I that you know, I'm probably not your guy. I'm that interested in like optimizing super hard into the like to becoming a player that's already great to making them even better. I'm not that interested. But I'm interested in making that player aware of, okay, like the way you're connecting with your team is you know, it's probably not going to be good for after you finish your working relationship with them, or you know, those things are more important to me um than
Interesting.
become yeah.
Maybe, I mean, he'll retire before you, I would presume, but Novak Djokovic would probably be your man in terms of being open to alternative
Yeah.
mindsets
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
thinking about things. I've got two final questions for you. The first, there's been a little bit of controversy at Wimbledon. It's the first time Wimbledon has had uh, technology used for line calling, and some players have been unhappy about it and about the potential inaccuracies. You obviously will play across tournaments that do have that technology
Mm.
and ones that don't. Do you have a preference?
I definitely prefer with the machines
Okay.
because the humans make way too many mistakes and the mistakes that they make are big. Like the mistakes that machines are making are like millimeters. And okay, sometimes they do make that mistake. But with a human calling, they sometimes make like mixed mistakes of like inches, and that's like I can't let that go during a match. But if it was like this, like you know, like a centimeter or half an inch out, and they call it in, then yeah, it's close enough, you
Okay.
know. And I'm sure they're gonna keep like calibrating it to be to it being more specific over time. So I'm definitely more pro technology there.
And then final question. If you could change a rule in tennis on the ATP level, is there something that you would change and why?
Yeah, I have two.
Okay. Yeah.
I I would get rid of ads.
Okay.
That would shave off like at least 15 minutes per match. and unnecessary suffering. Play with one serve. That's a bigger change. But only one serve and no ad would make a match not go over, rarely go over 1 hour 45.
Okay.
Even if it's 7-6, 6-7, 7-6, it'll still be
And
without
with a no
compromising.
ad, who would you have? The server gets to decide which, or the receiver in terms of where they receive.
I think the server choosing.
Okay.
You still need to give the server a bit of advantage, but yeah.
Okay. And I guess talking there, obviously you're concerned or like would like shorter games. Wimbledon also got that backlash for the handling of the Fritz match in round
Oh
one or
yeah,
round two
those are just stupid.
with the
Like
curfew.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You would want to play because I guess it goes both ways, right? Players then complain at the Australian Open or the U.S. Open that they'll have to play till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then
Yeah,
Wimbledon cuts you off at 11.
yeah.
But you would rather just play until whatever time it takes to finish a match, than be forced to come back the next day.
I think so. But like for me, there's like zero necessity for that match to be like, why does that match start so late, especially on that court where they're starting matches at 1 p.m.? Like they could start at 11:30 and they could have easily finished that match. And I don't know, I don't exactly know the reason why they start the center court and the court one so late. But also that's like a typical match where like if you had no ad, that match would have been over before the curfew.
Yeah.
And like the deuce advantage points are normally the quality is not super, super high. It's like the both players making mistakes and kind of fighting and they're too long, you know?
Yeah.
So like I feel like that would really help the players and also the viewers because it's just you don't need to see 10 exchanges of errors. Um, and there'd be quicker shifts of momentum. There'd be more breaks. So like yeah, I feel like it'd be way better.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they have that in doubles, right? In some
Yes.
tournament, yeah,
Yeah.
not in non-majors. Um, Interesting. Yeah, it would definitely be. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see if that's a popular
Yeah.
suggestion.
Yeah.
It would definitely make things quicker, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, well, Taro, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and to come on the podcast. We'll definitely, it'd be great to have you on again in the future
Yeah.
to talk about,
Sure.
how parts of the season are going and other elements and any other controversies that might pop up.
Yeah. 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 Thanks a lot for having me. I enjoyed, kind
Great.
of, I've been enjoying doing some podcasts and stuff because they give you more time to talk.
Yes.
They're not the short ones. So thanks for
Yes.
having me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not quite Joe Rogan 3 hour long, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it definitely gives you time to like get full thoughts out and kind of follow up questions and not just like a press conference where
Yeah.
you got to flow through questions. Well, great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.